Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Welcome to another episode of Vuka Nazo, your morning news analysis show. My name is Sihle Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty. This is, of course, the Thursday edition of the show. Hey, remember, if you like our content, do exactly that. Hit that like button. Do it now, whether you're watching the simulcast on Facebook or on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube in particular, well then do me an even bigger favor. Subscribe to the channel, won't you? Join the over 800 of you who have joined and subscribed since the beginning of January. Thank you so much. Help me reach my goal of 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Now, a reminder to you that we have a website. Find us at BigDaddyLiberty.com. There, of course, you can also pledge some financial support. Join the BDL Club. It hasn't been formalized yet, but it will be, with super sweet merch on the way. But join the BDL Club. Be someone who contributes 100 Rand per month towards the show. Now, with that jibber jabber out the way, how about we get straight into the news? It is a tale between two political parties in the one corner. Those wearing the blue t-shirts looking like Smurfs and indeed making a whole bunch of noise. The DA marching on in the other corner. Those wearing the yellow t-shirts looking like used... I don't know, whatever yellow thing that looks used, whatever that is. But indeed, those two political parties, the DA versus the ANC, going head to head in a sense today, with the DA marching on Luthuli House. And why are they marching? Well, they're marching on the issue, rather, of load shedding and the increase in the price of electricity. You'll remember, of course, NARSA having granted Eskom an 18.6 or so % increase in electricity. The DA pissed off by that, saying, no, stuff it, we're going straight to the source of the problem, namely the ANC, and marching, of course, to Luthuli House. Those scenes playing out this way, a tale, as I said, of two parties. Now, we know this scene before. We've seen it happen before. Even as I'm saying this, I want to remind you of what happened the last time the DA marched on Luthuli House. Those thugs, those thugocrats, as I call them, who wear yellow, assaulting DA members. And indeed, as I said last time, you know, I had friends who had injuries from that particular incident. Now, the issue becomes this time the DA beefing up its security ahead of this particular protest in anticipation perhaps of an ANC who would maybe respond violently once again. Let me read this EWN piece which detailed the heavy police presence and even private security that the DA had hired for itself there as such. Now, the EWN piece basically details how a heavy police presence is being maintained at the Mary Fitzgerald Square. Safety and security measures are being reinforced by private security personnel wearing yellow and orange reflectors. The march had been expected to kick off earlier in the morning, but a few DA members had started gathering as well. The party, of course, that's the DA, expecting thousands to join its march against the ANC over load shedding, end of quote. Now, of course, at the time of me doing this recording, the march itself hadn't quite proceeded, so I have no idea as to what the outcomes of this particular march will look like. We'll keep an eye on that in tomorrow's episode of Vuka Nazo, but it's enough to say this. This is mere politics. This is mere politics. This is the DA trying to essentially get a bit of attention on this issue. Can't fault them for that, and I just as equally as I wouldn't fault an EFF, which also recently marched against load shedding. However, at the end of the day, the bottom line remains this. There is absolutely no leadership in this country at the moment on the issue of the energy crisis. You have a president, a corrupt kleptocrat of a president on the one hand, who seems to think that a 6-bullet point emergency plan is enough, or worse yet, going hat in hand, begging Eskom not to implement a NERSA price increase. That seems to be the be-all, end-all of what your beloved president thinks that will solve with this load-shedding crisis. I'll say this once, I'll say it again, there is no leadership on the issue of electricity. What we need now is really simply this: privatize electricity production, allow the private sector to come in and indeed to provide what the government and the ANC simply cannot. Ah yes, South Africa, South Africa, South Africa. Our race obsession and indeed race-based empowerment laws are exactly the laws that are preventing investment into this country and are exactly the reason why South Africans will never have nice things. What am I talking about in this particular instance? Well, we're looking at Starlink. You remember that service which saw SpaceX, the company, of course, that is owned by South African-born billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk. SpaceX had launched those over 3,000 satellites into orbit, which were providing internet, high-speed internet services. Now, you would have expected, and a lot of South Africans perhaps were expecting, that with Elon Musk being South African-born, that South Africa might be one of the first countries that stands to benefit from this innovative and great service, especially because Starlink allows those of us who live in rural areas to have access to high-speed internet at a much lower latency level. Now, let me just quickly remind you as to what this service is. As I mentioned, those 3,000 satellites having been launched into space, the My Broadband piece, which wrote this article up, reminds us that these are, now, due to Starlink satellites being located much nearer to Earth's surface than conventional geostationary internet beaming satellites, Starlink provides much higher speeds and lower latency than the average satellite service. The standard rectangular satellite dish for residential usage is rated for download speeds from 20 to 100 megabytes per second, with latency between 25 and 50 ms. End of quote. Now, I'm going to read on from this piece because this is the service that a lot of us were excited by. We were hoping to get it first, but no, you're definitely not going to get it first here in South Africa because of two things: our race-based legislation, which prevents investment, as I said, and two, the overly regulated market in this country, the fat layer of political elites who are bureaucrats, whose only job is to create nothing. And I mean absolutely sweet nothing other than stifling rules that make it harder for business in this country. And in this particular instance, I'm talking about ICASA, who I'll get to in a moment, where, as I mentioned, at least 20 African countries have either rolled out or said to get Starlink before South Africa, according to the official coverage map, which I have on screen. Now, let me get into this particular reason, as I mentioned, as to why we here in South Africa are likely not to see Starlink anytime soon or even at all. Now, that regulatory board, as I mentioned, or the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, ICASA, in the article is cited as having said the following. Now, ICASA told My Broadband that SpaceX would require an Electronics Communications Services license and Electronic Communications Network Service license to provide Starlink in South Africa. In other words, red tape, more licenses, which allows politicians and the political elites to extract money and grift off of entrepreneurs. Let me read on. It also had to get a radio frequency spectrum license to carry traffic over the radio waves between its satellites and its customer terminals. You can just hear from that. The amount of red tape is insane. And again, I'm not just saying this because it's Starlink that we're talking about. Existing companies have to run this regulatory burden, this regulatory hurdle in order to provide these services in this country. Now, leave that aside. Then comes in the real grift, the real nonsense that characterizes South Africa, which is race-based, indeed racist, empowerment legislation, which effectively sees black elites trying to extract wealth from something they have nothing to do with and they've created or contributed nothing towards. Let's look at that particular section where the same article cites how Starlink had been told that it too has to play ball and effectively play by these race-based empowerment laws. ICASA and SpaceX have repeatedly failed to respond to my broadband's queries on any progress with discussions since that time. This comes after we attempted to find out from ICASA whether the service's rollout would be impacted by a highly controversial requirement that internet service providers must be 30% black owned to get licenses to operate in South Africa. ICASA told my broadband that it would not consider any new applications for licenses from companies that did not comply with this rule. End of quote. There you have it. That rule that basically requires that 30% of your business has to be effectively given. And again, they'll pretend that it's on behalf of black people, ordinary black people. No, it's not. We know this game now. This is for politically connected black elites who effectively want to rent-seek their way into these sort of businesses, contributing nothing to them, and as a consequence are adding extra cost to the cost of businesses in this country and the cost for us as consumers, whilst contributing nothing to it. Is this the reason why we're not going to see Starlink in this country? I can also only speculate like this my broadband piece, but if it is, it really is the reason why we can never have nice things. All right, that's it for the Thursday edition of the Vuka Nazo morning show. If you love how I start your news day, then you'll love what our friends over at the Daily Friend do Mondays to Thursday at 1:30 p.m. live. They'll help you wrap up your news day. That's dailyfriend.co.za. And as I make my way out, a reminder to you, please hit that like button and of course share this video. And don't forget that, of course, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we have a website, BigDaddyLiberty.com. With that being said, I'll see you tomorrow, bright and early, for another episode of Vuka Nazo.